Coming up on our newscast tonight. Pyongyang and Washington rush to get everything ready for their historic summit. Top North Korean officials head to the U.S. possibly to meet with figures like the nation's top diplomat. Delegations of both sides are reportedly in Singapore for talks as well. South Koreans will be logging fewer hours at work thanks to new limits imposed by the government. The shortened work week is expected to help improve the nation's quality of life. After months of decline, South Korea's consumer confidence jumps up in May, a trend driven mainly by the recent improvement in inter-Korean ties and the historic Pyongyang-Washington summit to be held in June. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome. I'm Daniel Choi. Our starting point is once again Pyongyang and Washington's multi-pronged diplomatic activities, all possibly designed to assist with preparations for the summit between their leaders, originally set to be held on June 12th in Singapore. Moments ago, U.S. President Donald Trump tweeted North Korea's former intel chief Kim Yong-chol is heading to New York. Lee Ji-won updates us on the rapid developments.
North Korea and the United States seem to be getting closer to finally announcing that the first ever Pyongyang-Washington summit will in fact be held. The vice chairman of the North Workers' Party, Kim Yong-chol, who is also in charge of the regime's United Front Department, arrived in Beijing Tuesday morning to fly to the U.S. According to South Korea's Yonhap News, citing sources in China, Kim's name is on the list of people taking a flight to New York on Wednesday at 1 p.m. The same sources say Kim will meet with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. This would be the third time for the two to meet. Also in Beijing with Kim was the official in charge of North Korean affairs at Pyongyang's Foreign Ministry, Choi Kang-il. The two initially booked a New York-bound flight leaving Tuesday afternoon, but postponed it to the next day. The change in schedule was likely because of a meeting arranged between Kim and Chinese officials at the airport on Tuesday. The same sources say Kim and Pompeo are expected to put together the final pieces for the summit and reaffirm what the North is doing to denuclearize and that the U.S. will guarantee the regime's security. Meanwhile, late Monday, an 8-member delegation from the North is said to have landed in Singapore, according to sources there, to meet their U.S. counterparts. The North Koreans are led by the Secretariat of the regime's State Affairs Commission, Kim Chang-sun, a top logistics and protocol official. The U.S. team, consisting of some 30 officials from the White House and State Department, led by Deputy White House Chief of Staff Joe Hagan, arrived in the Southeast Asian city-state earlier that day. Although the exact time of the meeting has not been disclosed, the two sides are expected to have met as early as Tuesday to discuss logistics protocol and specific venues and itineraries for Kim Jong-un and President Trump. Representatives of the U.S. and North Korea are also to resume their meeting at the inter-Korean border village of Panmunjom on Wednesday. Those delegations are led respectively by former U.S. ambassador to South Korea and former nuclear negotiator Sung Kim, and North Korea's Choi Sun-hee, who serves as the regime's vice foreign minister and is a former director of her ministry's North American department. The talks began on Sunday, but according to diplomatic sources, they did not convene on Monday and Tuesday. The same sources say the two are expected to have worked on the summit's agenda and other details. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Delegations from Pyongyang and Washington are expected to have met at the inter-Korean tourist village of Panmunjom to fine-tune an agenda for the possible summit. The U.S. is likely trying to clarify the steps the regime should take to denuclearize. Oh Jung-hee sheds light on what might have been discussed between the two sides.
Defining the 3 steps North Korea should take in its path towards denuclearization. That's what the U.S. delegation that met with North Korea's negotiators at Panmunjom hopes to achieve, according to Washington's former chief North Korean negotiator, Joseph Yoon. In an interview with the New York Times on Sunday, he said Sung Kim, who's leading the U.S. delegation, is likely to be forming a set of documents with Pyongyang that detail the 3 steps Pyongyang should take to abandon its nuclear weapons. The first is North Korea declaring how far it's willing to go in abandoning the program. The second is deciding how and when Pyongyang will offer an explanation of that process to Washington. And the final step is determining how the U.S. will verify those claims. The U.S. attempts to reach an agreement with North Korea on these three steps as part of efforts to make sure that North Korea is sincere about denuclearizing, which is a crucial point to be confirmed before the Kim-Trump summit. But the North Korea-U.S. talks at Panmunjom are expected to deal with another big question from the other side of the table: how Washington will promise North Korea the security of its regime. After a meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on Saturday, South Korean President Jae-in said North Korea's biggest concern is whether it can trust the U.S. over ending hostility and guaranteeing regime security in case it completely denuclearizes. How much Washington and Pyongyang are able to narrow their differences on these points will determine whether the Kim-Trump summit will be a success. 오정희, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the two Koreas finalized who will be attending this Friday's high-level talks. Seoul is sending a 5-member delegation led by Unification Minister Cho Myung-gyun. That includes the Vice Ministers of Land and Sports. The Vice Minister of the Forest Service could take part as well if the two sides end up discussing forestation projects. Pyongyang's team will have 5 members as well, led by Lee Sun-kwon, the head of the North's Inter-Korean Affairs Committee, and the ministers in charge of railways and sports. This would mark the first round of high-level talks since the Inter-Korean meeting back in April. Measures to implement the summit agreement will be the dominant topic. North Korea's state media urged Washington to suspend joint military drills with the South if it wants to have the talks with the regime. Regarding such claims, Seoul's defense ministry responded, there are no changes in the planned exercises. For details, let's turn to our Park Ji-won.
North Korea's Nodong Shinmun newspaper said Tuesday that if the U.S. wants the summit talks with the North to happen, it should suspend joint military drills with South Korea. In an editorial, the state-run paper said it's an international custom to refrain from engaging in military actions when two parties are in negotiations. It also warned that if the U.S. deploys strategic assets in the drills, then everything will go back to square one. The paper also directly points the finger at the annual Ulchi Freedom Guardian exercise, the large-scale drills conducted jointly by the South and the U.S. every year around August, saying the exercise destroys peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. Regarding those claims, South Korea's defense ministry said that Seoul and Washington haven't yet discussed the matter, and so far there has been no change in plans. It noted that the drills are held on an annual basis and said they are purely defensive.
These are annual military drills which are defensive in nature, and our understanding is that there will be no particular changes to our plans.
Ulchi Freedom Guardian is conducted for about 10 days every August, involving some 50,000 South Korean troops and over 17,000 U.S. troops, training in the use of computerized command and control. This year's exercise is slated to begin at August 20th. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Washington chose to delay imposing new sanctions targeting Pyongyang. The decision is in tune with the recent turnaround related to the planned historic meeting, with visible efforts on both sides to mend diplomatic ties. Oh Soo-young zooms in on this possible sign of thawing tensions.
The Trump administration has decided to hold off on additional sanctions against North Korea. Citing U.S. government officials, the Wall Street Journal reported Monday that Washington will indefinitely shelve the planned extra measures against the North, while the two sides hold talks to prepare for their upcoming summit. The report says officials had been ready to unveil the additional measures as early as Tuesday, targeting further sources of income for the cash-starved Kim Jong-un regime. The sanctions are believed to have included expelling North Korean laborers from foreign countries, as well as targeting Russian and Chinese entities with ties to the regime. Such measures were being prepared in response to the recent aggressive rhetoric from Pyongyang officials, which caused the U.S. leader to call off the summit. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the policy of maximum pressure against North Korea would continue in order to squeeze its economy. Washington's most recent round of sanctions in February targeted the North's illegal maritime trade and a global network of businesses that generate cash for the regime. However, with summit preparations between the two sides seemingly back on track, it seems Washington is aiming to maintain the progress on repairing their relations. In recent weeks, top officials have promised Pyongyang economic prosperity and US private investment should it fully denuclearize. Young, Arirang News.
There are various political and technical factors to be taken into account when it comes to the timetable for North Korea's denuclearization. Some watchers are confident the process could require just a couple of years. Others say at least 15. Park Hee-jun turned to some experts for their analysis.
Views differ about how long it could take for North Korea to denuclearize. Some experts say it could take well over a decade. Professor Siegfried Hecker of Stanford University, who's a former director of the Los Alamos Weapons Laboratory in New Mexico, told the New York Times that the disarmament process would require at least 15 years. According to a roadmap drawn up with his colleagues at Stanford Center for International Security and Cooperation, denuclearization would happen in 3 stages. Step 1 involves halting nuclear tests and all operations at nuclear reactors and related facilities. Step 2 is the dismantling of missiles and nuclear facilities, which will then have to be monitored and inspected. Finally, in the 3rd step, North Korea eliminates its nuclear program and joins the Non-Proliferation Treaty, redirecting its nuclear scientists and engineers to civilian programs. The last step alone would take a decade, meaning a total of more than 15 years. But other experts say the process could end much more quickly if the North is determined to do it.
I think it's possible for North Korea to denuclearize within President Trump's remaining years in office, as long as it chooses to, and it's likely to because the US will only ease sanctions and protect the regime when it does.
President Trump has set his own timetable for the North's denuclearization. If North Korea follows through with the plan until it's no longer a threat to the US, it could take maybe 2.5 to 3.5 years.
So rather than the technological issues of nuclear disarmament, the main factor could be North Korea's will and sincerity. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Big change for those who are punching in for work here in the nation. Starting July, employees will see their maximum time on the job reduced significantly. During today's cabinet meeting, President Jae-in outlined the rationale for the decision and how it will be implemented. Hwang Ho-jun shares with us his remarks.
A work week shortened from the current 68 hours to 52. That new limit will apply starting July 1st. And the president believes it will bring about positive changes in workers' daily lives.
OECD 국가의 연평균 노동시간보다 300시간 이상 더 많이 일해온 우리 노동자들이 장시간 노동과 과로에서 벗어나 가족과 더 많은 시간을 갖고 저녁이 있는 인간다운 삶을 누리는 계기가 될 것입니다.
At a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, President Moon said shorter working hours will be an opportunity for businesses to find creative ways to be more productive while also freeing up new jobs. He insisted that society will be able to handle the change, including the pay cut that will come with fewer hours and the extra burden on management. That's because the new regulations will be phased in, starting with companies with more than 300 employees. Regarding the recently approved $3.6 billion supplementary budget drawn up to create more jobs for young people and to boost the economy, the South Korean president urged the government to make sure that it's implemented without delay.
다소 늦어졌기 때문에 이제부터라도 청년들과 고용위기 지역 주민이 체감할 수 있도록 추경 사업들을 속도감 있게 진행하는 것이 무엇보다 중요할 것입니다.
Meanwhile, according to a Blue House press release, President Moon and his cabinet approved a bill passed by the legislature to appoint an independent counsel to investigate the political manipulation of online comments, the scandal named after a power blogger going by the handle Drew King. He allegedly rigged the internet comments to sway public opinion, while ruling party officials, including former lawmaker Kim Young-soo, are said to have covertly endorsed his campaign. Kim has denied the allegations. And the National Assembly passed the act last week. For the past few weeks, President Moon, along with the rest of the world, have been on a diplomatic roller coaster as North Korea and the U.S. go back and forth over their summit plans. But the president's meeting with his cabinet shows the administration is determined not to overlook pressing issues at home. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
The nation's top office held a meeting on Tuesday to review economic policies concerning job creation and income-led growth. President Moon Jae-in said this year's first quarter economic growth rate increased compared to the same period last year, but he also noted the nation's deteriorating income distribution, especially in the lower 20% bracket, which dwindled while the overall economy expanded 3.7% on-year in Q1. Attending the meeting were economy-related ministers, including Finance Chief Kim Dong-yeon, and they discussed the possible reasons behind the decrease in household income figures, such as aging society, minimum wage hike, and slump in the construction and retail sectors. In addition, the participants agreed to maintain the three major economic policies of the Moon administration, namely income-led growth, innovation-led growth, and fair competition, and discuss possible complementary measures. The South Korean government's financial assistance for low-income earners surpassed those households' income. This needed support comes amid the country's worsening job situation. Jong-un looks behind the record numbers reached for the first time in over a decade.
Financial assistance surpassed average earned income for low-income households in the first quarter of 2018. According to data from Statistics Korea on Tuesday, financial assistance from the government for low-income households, those whose income was in the lowest 20% of households, increased by over 21% compared to the previous year. Low-income households earned $440 a month on average, but received an average of $555 in financial assistance. This is the first time since 2003 that financial assistance for low-income households is higher than those households' earned income. This financial assistance includes government pensions and unemployment benefits. But while the government has been expanding support for low-income groups, the Statistics Korea report shows that low-income households saw their earned income drop by over 13% on-year due to the downturn in the labor market. Some experts worry that if the gap between earned income and financial assistance for low-income households widens, it could lead to further socioeconomic problems.
If too much money is flowing to people who can work, for example, the younger retirees or even younger people, then they may get the idea that, well, if we don't have to work to earn money, if that happens, then we're going to see a lot of problems in the labor market.
The government has been trying to boost the economy by income-led growth policies such as raising the minimum wage and reducing working hours in order to help boost domestic consumption levels. But one expert claims this may not boost income levels in the long run.
The problem with this policy, though, is that you don't raise your labor productivity. So in the end, you're not going to raise the income by much. You may reduce the size of the recession, but it is very difficult to increase your productivity and increase wages in the long run with this type of income support policies.
Amid an increase in the portion of elderly households and the worsening job market for temporary workers, financial assistance could continue to make up the bulk of low-income households' average income for a while longer. Jong-un, Arirang News.
Data released by the nation's central bank shows an uptick in consumer confidence. However, many fear such optimism may not last long, as there's little to celebrate when looking at the dismal job market. Kim Hye-sung breaks down the digits for us.
South Korea's consumer confidence rebounded in May after 5 straight months of decline since December. The Bank of Korea says the country's consumer sentiment index rose to 107.9 in May, up 0.8 points from the previous month. A reading above 100 means there are more optimists than pessimists about the economy in the coming months. The central bank attributed the uptick to the recent thaw in inter-Korea relations and the prospects of a North Korea-U.S. summit next month. But with gloomy economic figures like sluggish job growth over the last 3 months, experts say the uptick in consumer sentiment may be temporary.
The Consumer Sentiment Index is a leading indicator, but there have been cases where a rise in consumer sentiment didn't translate into an actual rise in consumption. Also, we have to see what happens with the ongoing trade spat between the US and China and rising US protectionism, as these factors could impact consumer sentiment.
3 of the 6 key indices that gauge consumer confidence went up. The index measuring people's sentiment toward current economic conditions rose 3 points to 89, and the sentiment on economic outlook for the next 6 months jumped 5 points to 101. Inflation expectations, which reflect the outlook for consumer price inflation over the next 12 months, stood at 2.6% in May, unchanged from the previous month. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
South Korean and U.S. researchers developed artificial cells that provide sustainable energy through photosynthesis. The fundamental unit of life with light created by the team can be used for medical experiments to cure diseases. Our Ko-Roon-hee explains further.
A team of Korean and U.S. researchers worked together to create photosynthetic cells, according to Korea's Science Ministry on Monday. Researchers said protein for photosynthesis from plants and protein for photoconversion from bacteria were combined to create an artificial mitochondria, the energy powerhouse of cells. The powerhouse can create adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, which is the essential energy carrier of cells. The joint research team emphasized that the artificial photosynthesis harnessing cell not only resembles living cells but also functions like them.
This unprecedented process mimics a plant's ability to transform light into energy, which is photosynthesis and bacteria reacting to light. Photosynthetic cells create energy, and this energy changes the structure of the cell.
Researchers say the new cells can lead to more experiments at the cellular level in a free environment.
The opportunity to treat diseases one cell at a time by putting synthetic organelles into a cell, changing the way the cell behaves physiologically.
According to the team's study published on the journal Nature Biotechnology, artificial cells can carry out metabolic activities for up to a month, depending on external environments. Ko-Roon-hee, Arirang News.
방탄소년단, better known as BTS, opened a new road for K-pop music in Hallyu. This week, the boy band topped the Billboard 200, a chart ranking America's most popular album of the week. Our Hong-Yu highlight the significance of this feat, a first by Korean artists.
South Korean boy band BTS set a new K-pop record this week, reaching the top of the Billboard 200. Their new album Love Yourself Tear became the first Korean album to rank first on that U.S. chart. Still, they're not the first K-pop artists to make the Billboard. That title belongs to Wonder Girls, who hit the charts in 2009. And in 2012, Psy of Gangnam Style fame reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. But the only one to make it to the top is BTS. Not only did they sell the most albums and tracks this week, but for their online activity, they also won Top Social Artist for the second year in a row at the 2018 Billboard Music Awards. This was the first time a South Korean artist has won a Billboard Music Award twice. There are reasons why it was BTS that wrote a new chapter in K-pop history.
Their main difference with other K-pop artists is that BTS made their way to the top step by step, already having a fan base. They won more fans based on their music, and due to that fandom, BTS was able to make it into the US. Language is no longer a limit in the global market.
This was the first time in 12 years an album not in English reached this level. That BTS sings mostly in Korean clearly isn't a problem for their fans.
I love them so much. It's really amazing that they came from a non-big three company, but they can make it to this far, and it's really amazing. It gave so much people hope. So I don't feel like we are fans and idols, but we feel like a big family together.
Their song always includes social issue that many people can relate so much to the song that they sang in the album.
BTS found a way to reach a global audience with their songs and opened a whole new avenue for K-pop. With so much momentum, eyes are on what they'll contribute next to the world of K-pop and beyond. Hong-Yu, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, it is raining here in Seoul. How long is it going to last?
Daniel, after a cloudy condition, it's finally coming down here in Seoul. The instability in the atmosphere has been forming rain clouds in the central areas and the western coast, which will bring down sudden showers tonight through the early morning hours. Now, during the day tomorrow, it'll be brighter than today, but the fine dust in the air will be again reaching levels considered bad, so make sure to take your masks with you. Now, for those of you in the south, also bring an umbrella since there will be some sporadic showers accompanied by some loud thunder and lightning at times again. And readings for Wednesday will be similar to today, with Seoul will wake up to 16 degrees Celsius, while Daegu and Gyeongju both starts up to 18 degrees. Seoul will top out to 24 degrees, and during the day, Gwangju will hit up to 27, Busan will peak up to 25 degrees. Now, clear and hot weather will continue for the time being, and on Friday, as we head into June, the daily highs in Seoul will rise even more. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's it for tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thanks for staying with us.